And welcome back to WTF is SRE. I hope you had a great moment to go off and do some networking with other colleagues that are here at this wonderful conference today. So before we get into our next talk, I just want to remind everyone you can ask questions during the talk right on the conference platform. Post your questions and your insights there, and we'll bring them into the conversation immediately following the presentation. Speaking of the presentation, one of the things that I miss dearly over the last year is traveling to see friends and colleagues and learn from and connect with one another. So our next talk is especially special, I think, because we're going to talk about some real travel all the way to Mars and all the way to Venus. So let me turn it over to Colin. Colin, please take it away. Security is from Mars and observability is from Venus. Thanks so much, Colin.
Thanks, Nathan. Thank you very much, and thank you to the team. So yes, quite a provocative title, and hopefully as we go through the presentation, it will reveal itself. But I think the most important thing is both the sentences here on how do we leverage the same data across Venus and Mars. So my name is Colin Fernandes, and I'm the EMEA Product Marketing Director at Sumo Logic. But before I want to go into my presentation, a heartfelt thank you to the team, to Teresa, Carla, for sending me all the hot sauces. It's not often something hot gets delivered to your doorstep, but when these arrived, I thought my whole week had changed. So thank you for that. But I think, with the themes that we're looking here in, it's getting hot in here, and really looking at some of the images and some of the other sessions that we've been having today is really talk about the area around continuous intelligence. But what I wanted to reflect on today was just a couple of things. Is the presentation is actually based on experience. It's based on some of our customers, and really looking at some of the insights that are really, really coming to the fore on the SRE role. But for those who don't know who Sumo Logic is, a quick introduction. So for over 10 years, we've been pioneering a new category of continuous intelligence, really looking at real-time machine data analytics for the cloud and for the digital era. The next is really looking at the transformation of the deluge of data that's being generated from digital business. And the third is to look at a cloud-native SaaS platform to build, run, and secure those applications and the underlying infrastructure. Today, Sumo Logic serves 2,500 customers with over 100,000 active users. And why I say that in context of the SRE is I'm glad to have my colleague Frank Reno on another channel, on another track, really looking at how we're actually helping the SREs today and what we're learning from them. And lastly, no challenge is too big or too small for Sumo. We're actually working with our customers to solve challenges and issues and really learning about the journey. So just a reflection, so as we look to the rest of the slides, is to talk about site reliability engineering. But we've actually learned a lot from this journey. So many customers have really started in the cloud. Many are cloud first, but a large proportion are in the process of migrating, modernizing, and consolidating the cloud. And my story to you today is to really take that information and share it with you and others. And it's been a great forum to chat with other developers today. But what really resonates is, the hot pillar, the three pillars that impact customer experience and really look at site reliability engineering. And the first one is really on how downtime affects business. It affects our business today more than ever. The second is really based around performance and really looking at how latency and issues impact the processing and the execution of your service. And I think from just looking and listening to other people today and looking at this track is to look at the sophistication of crime and really look at cybercrime and fraud and really understand the anticipated attacks that face us. Really taking those three pillars and really identifying. So thank you again, because I think some of your images that you shared with me really resonated to really bring out some of my story. So the three things that are impacting not only the SRE, but the communities, the IT admin, the data scientist, the solution architect, the IT admin, everybody responsible, the cloud architect, three things really come to the fore. The first is modern applications are becoming more distributed and more complex. And actually, if we look at some of the statistics around this, is to understand the investments that people are making in cloud in terms of the amount that's expected to be spent, 380 billion in 2020. But the other is the area around complexity, the area of advancement. So I attend a lot of seminars and webinars with AWS and Google and others, but it's interesting to see how containers, how serverless computing, and how new standards and new regulations are driving a new modern architecture. And then we move on to the middle pillar and really, coming back to the track and looking at the importance of how DevOps is progressing, how security is shifting left, and how customers are looking to drive a new operating model. And again, when we look at the spend, it also it's interesting to look at both sides on not just DevOps, but security, but understand that synergy and relationship. And lastly, I often think about Moore's law, the velocity, the volume, the veracity, and the variety of data. Cloud native machine learning and analytics are imperative. It's becoming critical for SREs today to really look at their skills. And what we're seeing today is how we're helping SREs drive better performance and deliver more agile and efficient services. So I started in IT a long time ago. This is my first container solutions event, but I just followed the line from left to right. So I was abstracting mainframes and applications a long time ago. So that gives you some idea of my age. But it's important to understand that these principles around three-tier and service-oriented architectures are really driving the paradigms into microservices and serverless. But there's another vector in terms of scale. So I often think in terms of objects, in terms of components, in terms of groupings of technology that serve a purpose. And it's important to understand that these disruptions and changes are continuous and really affects how we deliver as SREs on our commitments and our objectives. So modern applications are becoming more distributed, more complex. But there is a real need to look at a new operating model and help customers on that journey. So it's not something that's organically either in a company, but if you're actually looking at a native, born and bred project, you tend to find that many customers embrace security. But really, we know that customer experience is really based around the application. And it's about the application. I often say this, it's all about the app. And from many, many SREs today and many customers, we're hearing that, solutions are still siloed. They're still not delivering on that promise of a single pane of visibility. So I had the fortune to work with traditional APM solutions in the past. And it's very, very obvious that traditional APM solutions just don't cut it today. They struggle with scale. And it's important to understand that observability must also address the security needs of the application and the network and the infrastructure, and not operate in silos. So the other is to really make observability a promise, is to look at the data. Data is everywhere, siloed. So the question to really harness, unlock, and unify that data in the decision-making process of an SRE becomes critical. And what we talk about is a single version of truth and a single pane of glass that embraces security. Security is also becoming perimeterless. So I've had the fortune to work with companies like HP, IBM, VMware, who really understand that security has always progressed and changed. And today it's heightened because of the sophistication and the threat, not just from external, but also from the internal side. So really, we're pushing the boundaries, and our SREs are also pushing the boundaries in our customers to drive new ways to protect and secure. So there's a lot of fragmentation out there. And what I mean by fragmentation is just basically think of every single component in IT emitting a signal, a log, a metric, a trace, or an event. But this can be fragmented just due to the complexity of the service chain, the supply chain, and our partnerships. So really, it's not just about the code. It's about the data. It's about the machine data. It's about the best practices to progress and really advance. And what I liked here is when I looked at some of your GIFs, there's an interpretation from secret sauce to hot sauce, but to really look at some of the issues. And I wanted to just home in on my colleagues who are also doing another session around open source. And I think most of us know that open source is huge, it's advancing, but there's a lot of data out there. And we've embraced open source, again, to really communicate two things, to really look at the problems that can be associated. There's the good side, but there's also the day two of operations. And what's going on in the OS world, where we hear from not only the SRE, but from operations about metadata inconsistencies. We hear about naming standards being different as we search through different data sets. And it makes it very complex, and protocols. So these really impact the time and the effort in delivery. So I think most of you may know Rose and Jack, but really Rose is a developer and Jack is a security professional. And they have a special bond. And the bond really is something that I want to share with you, because this is something that's, really, I think, valuable, but really testifies on some of the use cases that I will share about the importance of driving that DevSecOps collaboration and ownership. But here we have an iceberg. So some of you might work out how my brain ticks in terms of trying to bring this together. But we've often seen this iceberg. I've seen it many times. But it's important to really, really reflect on two key points. Firstly, observability should be able to handle and really large scale data sets. So while monitoring and diagnosing, it's important to understand the amount of data that's needed in all these particular areas. So when we actually study these different tiers, it's interesting to find out that when we look at the bottom side on really troubleshooting, it's not just about the SRE, but it's also about the service owner, the threat hunter, the security person. But there's a lot more data needed to resolve the issue. So for our customers, we embarked on solutions and use cases to optimize the process of root cause, find the needle in the haystack, help find and detect issues. Issues can occur not just because of a monitoring or a performance issue, but also because of a security issue. So the other message here is that observability needs to have a very scalable analytics engine. And observability demands that there is, a lot of data to process to get to the actionable contextual insights. So with that, we've, been through fire, ice, the Titanic and the iceberg. But it's important to understand here on what that actually means. So really managing modern apps is no easy task. And the other is, as I mentioned, is, for some, what I call tenured or seasoned professionals, coding, takes a certain approach, a certain architecture, but things advance. And the threat is really important to understand of really looking at the right data. So anomaly detection is critical when you're looking at application security, when you're looking at the overall workload, to detect threats, but to bring that information into that build, test, release cycle. The other is to make it easy to search, to have pre-built, ready-to-go queries. So something else that's important for the SRE is not to give tools that are complex, but to give ease of use, but also share community insights and best practices. To have one converged platform for observability, we showed you the previous diagram, is to integrate intelligence, to integrate threat intelligence. We're not just working with one vendor, we're working with a multitude of tools. So we need to enrich the security information and the monitoring and troubleshooting information, and really ensure that we're actually getting the telemetry and data from the right source. And lastly, is really looking at the human scale issue. I think looking at, we've all been through the pandemic. We're facing it now. Some of us are still in it. And we need to now look at other areas of automation. So what we're seeing also is the appetite to really look at more machine learning, more AI, but really looking at new ways of driving better value in automation. So bringing this all together and really having it in one place, everything in one place, centralization of your logs, events, metrics, and traces. An interesting point here is when you look at an AWS migration, when you look at I've just spoken to a recent customer, and we spoke to the DevOps team about the Kubernetes deployment, around Fargate, around many, not just AWS tools, but GitHub, Jenkins, Jira, a multitude of tools, and also looking at open source in the context of Red Hat, Linux, OpenShift, and a number of technologies. What we need to understand here is the complexity of collecting data and ensuring that that data is protected due to its sensitivity and value. And it's important to bring this together, but keep it fresh in real time and ensure that we are delivering that truth to the SRE, but to others that work together collaboratively. So I love this because we went from fires to the fire engine to really looking at figuring out, what do we do? How can we help? Or how do SREs manage these large systems today? So for Sumo Logic, observability at scale, we analyze 871 petabytes of data per day, and really looking at multiple regions and 18.6 billion events scanned per second. But more importantly is not about those huge amounts, but to understand that data is everywhere. And when I actually talk to customers today, we often look at different areas of the modern stack: the infrastructure, the APIs, the application runtime code, the databases, the higher level services, the business processes, and really looking at the whole architecture that takes you from the data center to the edge. So we've taken it one stage further because we believe that partners are critical. So partners, the importance to make sure that data integration, the data is securely and quickly integrated across DevSecOps. So it's important to recognize, because I've been talking to some of the other attendees on some of the areas here around development, which is really where we focus. So Jira Cloud, Source Labs, really looking at technologies that are advancing and solutions that we are working with, and SREs are actually, it's in their tool bag. And from a security side, we're seeing, other technologies that are advancing in the cloud: JFrog, Aqua, and a whole host. And the other side is really looking at, the network providers that have evolved into, identity and access management, ITSM, and different areas. Today, I had to resolve and actually discuss a MITRE attack, but actually with an SRE, but she wanted to know more about the life cycle. How can we help, or how do SREs use our technology to help in the MITRE life cycle across a migration? So security is not just, happening once. It crawls, and threats are everywhere. So my favorite slide is really based around the DevSecOps process: the planning and managing, the developing and the building, the testing, the releasing and the running. And all these cycles and processes are fairly complex. Sometimes they're distributed. But what's important here is how the SRE delivers, how they're measured, what objectives do you place on performance, on security and availability. And on the right-hand side is also going a stage further. And why I think it's really, really important here is that we provide a community around global intelligence where we benchmark microservices, we benchmark migrations, we benchmark Kubernetes deployments, because we're actually identifying new things. So as we go into this new world, it's important to reflect on some of the technologies that are playing into this space and how we're helping customers with Kubernetes, how we're helping customers with their containers, with their serverless migrations. And we're also helping customers re-architect, rehost, re-platform, really offer that data-driven approach to driving better efficiency and optimization. And I took this from one of the reports that we recently put out there, is how do you benchmark high performance? And really it's based around objectives around business, agility, profitability, and hopefully that will provide a happy and work balance, we hope. But really, it's not just about the fire driver. It's about putting out the fire. And one of the best use cases that an SRE DevOps engineer gave me was really a plan on how they leverage data into their use cases, into their day. And it starts at the bottom around monitoring, operations monitoring, and troubleshooting. It's really looking at issues, supporting the operations, looking at application-related issues, looking at thresholds, and really driving that paradigm. But then looking for feedback, looking for greater insights into root cause, looking at the broader picture, and finally, bringing that up to the business need. So many of our customers look at the business use case, and I think there we have, for the site reliability engineer, with some of our mature customers who are engaging and collaborating with the security professionals, but also driving data decisions with the business. So I'm nearing the end of my practice, but I wanted to share some real best practices so that we can open up the chats. They've been extremely good today. But what are those best practices is to just think of 6 at the moment, is to pivot on error and latency. Also think about downtime. And my favorite word now is context. The right context, the real context, and not really focusing on false positives and data that's not right. And lastly, it's about proactive and reactive. But today, on speaking to about 5 or 6, it was actually there was a question about how much is it costing me? So to really look at a value in the context of ROI is critical. And lastly, visibility and loan, to consistently fine tune, to give the SREs the capabilities and the insights from operations. And if you ever remember the DevOps story with the wall in the middle, it's important to share. And what we realize is that the more collaboration there is, the more trust we have. So democracy and trust of data is critical. So with that, I wanted to walk through a day in the life of an SRE. And I put it down here. And typically that's a lot of work. Yes, something happens, check everything, check Kubernetes, check the app, check the infrastructure. It sounds easy, but it takes time. But for SREs that want to embark on a modern way, is to give you this in a dashboard in real time. So with that, I want to thank the team, but my message, and I hope that we can have more chats, and I urge you to join our other session with Frank and the team, to think about these key pillars, is built on a modern app for a modern business. to really have that visibility into those complex microservices and layers. Deliver a service with economics and value engineering, SRE, and reliability come with reliable economics. Scalable and elastic is not a given. It's just something that's demanded and needed. And lastly, security from day one. So thanks to Jack and Rose, thanks to you to take that fire and hopefully put it out. And with that, I really want to thank you for allowing Sumo Logic to take part in this event today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for your talk. We don't have any questions, but someone's reached out and said just how much they enjoyed listening to your talk and how much they've learned. So yeah, it's really well received. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.